Before Marvel made universe building feel inevitable, the 1990s tried to do it on network television. Every studio wanted its own shared world. And for a while, crossovers were seen as the next big thing. Characters from one sitcom would stroll into another like it was the same block, but most of the time, it didn't make sense. The tone shifts were jarring, the plots paper thin, and the dialogue groaned under the weight of forced enthusiasm. Still, we tuned in because when you're 10 years old and two of your favorite worlds collide, it feels like television history. Only later did we realize how many of those collisions were awkward fender benders, not miracles. Tonight, on the Throwback, we're rewinding to the 6 most embarrassing crossovers of the 1990s and the strange network logic behind them. Why crossovers were the ultimate 90s gimmick. In the 90s, networks lived and died by appointment viewing. Streaming didn't exist, and if they wanted to keep you glued to one channel, they had to create events. That's where the crossover came in. A built-in publicity machine wrapped in nostalgia, acting like a reward for loyal viewers. ABC had its TGIF block, NBC had its must-see TV, and executives learned that if they could link shows, they could double their ratings for one night. Sometimes it worked. The Homicide, Life on the Street visit to Law & Order was brilliant. Gritty cops in each other's world just made sense. But most crossovers stretched credibility until it snapped. Color palettes clashed, laugh tracks met melodrama, and guest stars wandered through scripts like they were lost in another universe. The gimmick was irresistible, but rarely sustainable. By the late 90s, the novelty had turned to parody. Yet in those awkward experiments, you can trace television's first effort to build what we now call a multiverse. Flop number 1, the sitcom misfire. Let's start with the one that seemed harmless, the so-called TGIF universe. ABC tried to convince us that Family Matters, Step by Step, and Full House all shared the same world. The crown jewel of that idea was when Urkel, the clumsy engineering prodigy from Family Matters, appeared on Full House. On paper, it sounded brilliant. Steve Urkel was a pop culture icon, the human equivalent of a laugh track. Why not drop him into another hit sitcom and watch the ratings soar? The problem was chemistry, or maybe gravity. Full House already had its own rhythm, gentle dad jokes, and moral lessons tied in a neat bow. Dropping Urkel into that harmony was like suddenly inserting a foghorn into a lullaby. His slapstick overwhelmed the softer tone of the Tanner household, turning a warm family episode into an exhausting gimmick. The audience loved Urkel, but seeing him bounce around someone else's living room felt contrived. It wasn't the worst episode of Full House, but it showed exactly how fragile those cross-network fantasies were. Instead of creating a shared world, it exposed just how different these sitcoms really were. And that was the lesson networks kept ignoring. You can't paste together audiences who love different brands of comfort. They tried it again and again, chasing that one-night spike, assuming no one would notice how unnatural it all felt. Spoiler, people noticed. Flop number 2, the sci-fi/fantasy disaster. If sitcoms were bad at crossing over, sci-fi shows were worse because coherence actually mattered. No example captures that better than the infamous Cops: The X-Files crossover. Fox promoted it like a genius experiment. A single episode told entirely in Cops' handheld style, but featuring Mulder and Scully hunting a mysterious creature through Los Angeles. It had the DNA of 2 hit shows stitched together. Documentary grit meets paranormal tension. What could go wrong? Almost everything. The shaky cam drained the eerie atmosphere that made the X-Files work. The suspense vanished under blinding police floodlights, and Mulder's trademark monotone explanations sounded absurd, shouted over sirens. Cops thrived on human unpredictability. The X-Files relied on supernatural mystery. Combining them created a tonal clash so complete it became surreal. Viewers didn't know whether to laugh or duck. Behind the scenes, it was supposed to be experimental television, an anthology experiment where reality met fiction. Instead, it felt like the X-Files had wandered into an episode of America's Most Wanted. For a franchise defined by conspiracy, nothing broke the illusion faster than seeing police officers mugging for a documentary camera. While Mulder pretended the whole time it was serious business, it aired once, earned decent curiosity ratings, and was never tried again. Fans still debate whether it counts as canon, which tells you how little it belonged. That hour of television became a masterclass in how chasing novelty can unravel identity. What's crazy is it could have been a milestone. Network TV doing found footage before the format was trendy. Instead, it ended up like a crossover experiment conducted in an alternate universe where suspense and realism canceled each other out. By the time it faded to credits, the only real mystery left was who actually approved it. Flop number 3. The animated train wreck. Animation opened even stranger doors, and none were more bewildering than The Simpsons meeting the critic. On paper, this one seemed easy. Both were adult cartoons, rich in cultural satire. Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, hated the idea from the start. He thought it turned Springfield into an advertisement for another show, but Fox pushed it anyway, imagining a mega event that would prove their primetime animation block could rival anything. On Saturday mornings, the result was pure tonal whiplash. Jay Sherman, the film critic voiced by John Lovitz, arrived in Springfield to judge Homer in a film festival. The episode was packed with meta-jokes, inside references, and constant winking at the audience. Instead of clever synergy, it came off smug and self-congratulatory. The Simpsons had always mocked media hype, so when it suddenly became the hype, it felt like self-parody. Fans were split. Some remembered it as a funny one-off, but for others, it broke immersion. Springfield wasn't supposed to share space with other TV universes. It was its own satirical world. Bringing in Jay Sherman made it feel like product placement disguised as humor, and history sided with Groening. The critic aired its short-lived second run, then vanished. The crossover did little to save it and nearly alienated the loyal Simpsons base in the process. It was one of those moments where TV showed its seams, where creativity was bent to serve marketing rather than story. That's the difference between inspired cross-pollination and naked promotion. When done right, a crossover expands possibility. When done wrong, it feels like a room full of executives trying to high-five themselves. But here's the bigger picture. These crossover flops, each awkward in its own way, marked the end of an era when television still believed viewers could be tricked into caring through proximity alone. Up next, we'll keep sliding down the timeline into the strangest attempts yet. The ones that mixed tone, cast, and physics in ways no one asked for. Because if there's one thing the 90s taught us, it's that not every dream of connected universes deserves a sequel. Flop number 4. The teen drama collision. Nothing screams desperate for synergy like when rival teen shows try to merge worlds. In the mid-90s, network executives looked at the success of Beverly Hills 90210 and thought, what if lightning struck twice on adjacent nights? So when 90210 and its spin-off Melrose Place decided to share screen time, it was marketed as a must-see event, promising scandal on 2 zip codes. Instead, it exposed how artificial that shared universe really was. Characters wandered between sets like guests at the wrong party. You'd see someone leave a glittering West Beverly pool scene, then turn up brooding at Melrose Place apartments as if teleportation was part of the plot. The problem wasn't just logistics, it was tone. 90,210 dealt in glossy teen melodrama, while Melrose reveled in full-tilt soap chaos, schemes, affairs, and secret twins. When they met, something snapped. The kids suddenly sounded like adults in a therapy session, and the adults acted like they were auditioning for high school theater. Fans tuned in out of loyalty but left confused about continuity. Did both neighborhoods really exist down the same street? Why did moral lectures from Brandon Walsh collide with the operatic misery of Amanda Woodward. The crossover tried to blend sincerity with excess and ended up highlighting their incompatibility. Behind the scenes, Fox wanted cross-promotion to keep audiences flowing between shows, but storytelling couldn't survive the shuffling. Each series worked because of its insulated drama. Smashing them together erased that illusion. By the time the crossover ended, viewers were joking about the highway to Melrose, as if it were a portal to narrative chaos. It wasn't terrible television. It was just an unnecessary collision between two worlds that needed the distance to thrive. Flop number 5, the unnecessary procedural mashup. Next came the network's attempt to prove that franchising could happen before franchising was cool. NBC thought it would be brilliant to have Law and Order intersect with homicide. Life on the Street, uniting New York detectives with their grim Baltimore counterparts for a shared investigation. On paper, it sounded like gritty harmony, two respected procedural dramas joining forces for realism. The execution, however, played like a police convention gone off script. The issue wasn't quality. Both showed exceptional craft. The issue was identity. Homicide thrived on handheld intimacy and moral fatigue, while Law and Order relied on courtroom rhythm and stoic precision. When they collided, the visual grammar clashed. Cameras jittered through Baltimore grime, only to settle into New York's polished angles. Seconds later, characters addressed each other like tourists in their own genre, half lecture, half cameo. Viewers spent the entire two-parter adjusting to mismatched pacing. The Baltimore cops talked philosophy, while New York's team barked procedure. Instead of synergy, you got tonal whiplash, moral ambiguity, meeting legal briskness with no reconciliation in sight. Even the actors seemed uncertain whether they were guests or equals. The crossover finale wrapped the case neatly, but the journey felt forced, an obligation rather than inspiration. Ratings spiked, of course. NBC called it a success and floated talk of recurring exchanges. Yet critics noticed how both shows lost momentum afterward, each retreating to its comfort zone to reassert control. For Homicide, the brief exposure invited comparisons it didn't need. For Law and Order, it blurred a brand built on neat resolutions. That's the hidden cost of these television mashups. They're sold as creative experiments, but born from scheduling math. It proved that even serious drama wasn't immune to the crossover fever that plagued sitcoms. By trying to merge authenticity with formula, the network achieved neither, and quietly moved on as though the whole event had never happened. Flop number 6. The most embarrassing of all, and then there's the one that defines the phrase, what were they thinking? In 1997, ABC attempted an event so convoluted, it deserves its own cautionary tale. The night Sabrina the Teenage Witch crossed into Boy Meets World. Both were TGIF flagships. Both focused on coming-of-age comedy, and someone decided magic could spice up Corey Matthews' suburban realism. The promotion promised a spell of fun. The result was pure chaos. Sabrina appeared briefly in a Halloween-themed episode, sparking confusion over whether her witchcraft existed in the same universe as Corey's high school sitcom. One moment you had heartfelt life lessons. The next, you had talking black cats and disappearing classmates. Tonally, it was whiplash disguised as fun. The laugh track couldn't decide if it was amazed or terrified. Viewers who tuned in for the Matthews family suddenly faced literal sorcery, while Sabrina fans wondered why she was acting like an ordinary high school tourist. The crossover expanded during a night-long TGIF stunt, linking Sabrina, Teen Angel, and You Wish through a magical portal. Each show exchanged characters for a few minutes, creating the illusion of one sprawling fantasy world. It was a logistical disaster. Continuity vanished, punchlines missed timing, and what was meant as a shared celebration looked like channel surfing gone wrong. Behind the curtain, ABC executives were clinging to audience flow as Friday ratings dipped. Magic they figured could glue kids to the couch. Instead, it exposed how exhausted the TGIF formula had become. By trying to extend the brand with gimmicks, they made the network look desperate. And still, there's something endearing about its ambition. The crossover was cringe-worthy, yes, but also innocent. A relic of an era when television believed that all you needed for excitement was a guest star and a particle effect transition. Looking back, that night stands as the turning point, the moment when audiences realized crossovers weren't events anymore. They were marketing, wearing a Halloween costume. Those flashing portals, the fake thunder, the forced laughter. It was the decade's final magic trick, and the only spell it cast was disappearing ratings. What these flops taught networks. Every crossover on this list carries the same quiet lesson. Television chemistry can't be manufactured in a boardroom. Each failed experiment revealed the limits of network control and the stubborn individuality of tone. In chasing shared universes, producers forgot what made audiences care in the first place: consistency, character, and trust. You couldn't just drop Mulder into a reality show or sprinkle witches into life lessons without breaking the illusion. Viewers might forgive cliches, but they never forgive dishonesty about what a show truly is. By the end of the decade, networks reluctantly learned restraint. Crossovers became self-aware jokes instead of hype machines, and studios treated them like fan service rather than salvation. Ironically, those clumsy crashes paved the way for today's cinematic universes, the ones built with patience, not panic. Modern franchises owe a quiet debt to the 90s for teaching television how easily coherence can crumble. Still, there's nostalgia in those awkward attempts. They remind us of a simpler age, when a special event meant circling Friday night in a TV guide and hoping your worlds would collide. Maybe that's why we remember them, with equal parts cringe and affection. It wasn't just failure, it was ambition, flailing in real time, and in an odd way. That's what made 90s TV magical. If you love uncovering forgotten pop culture experiments like these, hit subscribe before you go. There's always another strange crossover waiting in the vault.